post remission therapy in acute myeloid leukemia. So induction therapy is given. So what is the next? What should be done next? So what is the post remission therapy? So induction of a durable first complete remission. So you have given induction therapy. So after induction, durable first complete remission. So this is critical to long-term survival in AML. However, if we don't give further therapy after induction therapy, all complete remission patients, so they will eventually relapse. So that is why post remission therapy is important. Otherwise, patients will relapse. So thus post remission therapy, so after induction, post remission therapy, it is designed to eradicate the residual, typically undetectable leukemic cells to prevent relapse and prolong survival. So you have given induction therapy and later patient should not relapse. So thus post remission therapy, so this is designed so as to eradicate the residual, that is typically undetectable leukemic cells, to prevent the relapse, and also because of prevention of relapse it will prolong the survival. So as with induction, so the type of post remission therapy in AML, it is selected for each individual patient. So the post remission therapy is not the same for patient. So the post remission therapy in AML, so this is selected for each individual patient based on the age of the patient, based on the fitness, and based on the cytogenetic or molecular risk. So the type of post remission therapy in AML is selected for each individual patient based on the age, fitness, and cytogenetic or molecular risk. So the choice between consolidation with chemotherapy or with transplantation is complex. So then we have to decide, should this patient after induction therapy, should he undergo chemotherapy or with transplantation? So this is complex and this is based on age of the patient, risk factors, and what are the practical considerations. So in younger patients, so we are stressing on younger patients. So in younger patients, receiving chemotherapy, post remission therapy with intermediate or high dose cytarabine for 2 to 4 cycles is standard practice. Younger patients receiving chemotherapy, so post remission, what they'll receive intermediate or high dose cytarabine for 2 to 4 cycles is standard practice. So higher doses of cytarabine during post remission therapy, they appear more effective than standard doses such as are used in induction, and for those who do not have adverse risk genetics. So those who are not having adverse risk genetics, so what can be given? So post remission, what has to be given? High dose cytarabine has to be given 2 to 4 cycles compared to standard doses which are used in induction. So in younger patients without any adverse risk cytogenetics, we proceed with chemotherapy. So recent studies suggest that long-standing practice of high dose cytarabine, that is 3 gram per meter square every 12 hours on days 1, 3 and 5 may not improve survival over intermediate dose cytarabine for such patients. So recent studies suggest that long-standing practice of high dose cytarabine, that is 3 gram per meter square, so every 12 hours on days 1, 3 and 5, so it may not improve survival over intermediate dose cytarabine, that is 1 to 1.5 gram for such patients. Thus the European Leukemia Network has recommended intermediate dose cytarabine at 1 to 1.5 gram per meter square every 12 hours on days 1 to 3. So instead of days 1, 3 and 5, here European Leukemia Network, so this has recommended 1 to, that is intermediate dose, 1 to 1.5 every 12 hours on days 1 to 3. So as the optimal post remission chemotherapy approach for favorable and intermediate risk younger patients for 2 to 4 cycles. So this is the optimal post remission chemotherapy, that is intermediate dose cytarabine 1 to 1.5 gram per meter square every 12 hours on days 1 to 3 for younger patients with favorable and intermediate risk younger patients. While high dose cytarabine may not be necessary, it is important to note that younger favorable risk patients have worse outcomes when doses less than 1 gram per meter square are used. While high dose cytarabine may not be necessary, but it is important to note that younger favorable risk patients, they have worse outcomes when doses less than 1 gram. So it should be maintained around 1 to 1.5 gram per meter square. In contrast to favorable risk patients, intermediate or adverse risk patients, they should proceed with allogenic HCT in complete remission 1 when feasible. See, favorable risk cytogenetics, so those patients, they proceed with chemotherapy, that is intermediate dose cytarabine. So if the adverse risk, intermediate or adverse risk patients, no, they should, so after complete remission 1, they should proceed with allogenic hematopoietic stem cell transplant. And because older patients, they have increased toxicities with higher doses of cytarabine. So European Leukemia Network, so they recommend relatively attenuated cytarabine. In younger patients, attenuation is not given, but in older patients, no, attenuated, in favorable risk also attenuated doses are given. So it is 0.5 to 1 gram per meter square every 12 hours on days 1 to 3. So in a younger favorable risk patient, it is intermediate. Younger younger patients, okay, favorable risk patients, so post remission intermediate dose cytarabine. Older favorable risk patients, so it is attenuated therapy, so post remission, so this is attenuated therapy. Okay. So then so there is no clear value for no clear value for intensive post-remission therapy in non-favorable risk older patients, allogenic HCT in complete remission 1. So in non-favorable, again these patients up to age 75 years, or instead of HCT, what they can do is investigational post-remission therapy is recommended, that is still drugs are under investigation. So indeed post-remission therapy, see, favorable patients, okay, but unfavorable patients, no. So newer agents in both is an appropriate where all the newer agents like both older and younger patients. So for patients treated initially with lower intensity regimens that include venetoclax, the current practice is to, so older patients who have been treated with lower intensity regimens like venetoclax, so the current practice is to continue the repetitive cycles of the same combination of agents after remission until disease progression. So for patients who have been treated initially with lower intensity regimens such as venetoclax, what is the current practice? It is to continue this repetitive cycles of the same combination of agents after remission until disease progression, and therapy must often must be abbreviated over time due to cumulative myelotoxicity. So therapy should be abbreviated over time because of the cumulative myelotoxicity. Allogenic HCT, so this is the best relapse prevention strategy. So for AML, what is the current available best relapse prevention strategy? So allogenic HCT, so this is the best relapse prevention strategy currently available for AML. So allogenic HCT is probably best understood as an opportunity for immunotherapy. Residual leukemia cells potentially elicit an immunological response from donor immune cells, the so-called graft versus leukemia effect. Allogenic HCT is probably best understood as an opportunity for immunotherapy. See, this is an opportunity for immunotherapy. Residual leukemic cells, no, they potentially elicit an immunological response from donor immune cells. So the so-called graft versus leukemia effect, graft and leukemic cells. So this is called as graft versus leukemia effect. So the benefit of graft versus leukemia in relapse risk reduction, unfortunately, this is offset somewhat by increased morbidity and mortality from complications of allogenic HCT, including graft versus host disease. The benefit of this graft versus leukemia effect in relapse risk reduction, but unfortunately, so this is HCT is acting as a immunotherapy, but it is offset by graft versus host disease. So given that relapsed AML, it is typically resistant to chemotherapy. Allogenic HCT in CR1, that is before relapse ever occurs, is a favored strategy. Don't wait till relapse occurs. So after complete remission, unfavorable and intermediate cytogenetics, so better is HCT, and relapsed AML is typically resistant to chemotherapy. We have often explained to patients that transplant can effectively eliminate the needle in a haystack, but not a stack of needles. So if transplant is given, it will eliminate the needle in a haystack, but not a stack of needles. So transplant, it is recommended for patients aged less than 75 years who do not have favorable risk disease and who have an HLA matched donor, related or unrelated. So we also recommend allogenic HCT in complete, so even for intermediate risk disease also, after induction therapy, HCT is recommended. However, a considerable debate exists regarding whether allogenic HCT in complete remission, it is a requirement for younger patients with intermediate risk AML, as one large series from the Medical Research Council, this reported that such patients have similar outcomes if transplanted only after relapse and achievement of complete remission to sparing some the long-term morbidity of transplantation. So that said, allogenic HCT is generally recommended as soon as possible after complete remission 1 is achieved, unless the patient is in a favorable risk group. So even in the intermediate risk group, after induction, transplantation is preferred. Increasingly, patients, so for all these HLA matched donors should be there. Patients without HLA matched donors are considered for alternative donor transplants. If HLA is not available, so then there are different alternative donor transplants. So these alternative donor transplants include HLA mismatched unrelated, HLA mismatched and also unrelated, haplo-identical related, and umbilical cord blood even in complete remission 1. Not only matched, but these can also be tried. More effective and safe methods of in vivo T cell depletion. Post-transplant cyclophosphamide following mismatched transplantation. See, now because of the availability of after transplanting of after transplantation, post-transplant cyclophosphamide following mismatch transplantation. No? So this have broadened the availability of potential allogenic hematopoietic stem cell transplantation donors. So now virtually any patient who have a healthy parent or a child haploidentical, so they have an available donor suitable for allogenic HCT if desired. So any patient with a healthy parent or a child, that is who is haploidentical, so they have an available donor suitable for allogenic hematopoietic stem cell transplant if desired. Long term outcomes with conventional chemotherapy for older patients or dismal, transplantation for such patients is expanding even for older patients also. Because the long-term outcomes with conventional therapy in older patients, it is dismal. So in these older patients also, transplantation for such patients is expanding. So even for older patients, non-randomized data demonstrate curative potential for older patients in complete remission when treated with reduced intensity conditioning regimens and allogenic HCT. So even in older patients also who have been treated with reduced intensity conditioning regimens, so even allogenic HCT is advised. And trials comparing allogenic HCT with intensive chemotherapy or autologous HCT have shown improved duration of remission with allogenic HCT. So trials are comparing allogenic HCT with intensive chemotherapy, post-transplant chemotherapy or autologous HCT. So they have shown improved duration of remission with allogenic HCT. However, the relapse risk reduction observed with allogenic HCT it is partially offset by the increase in fatal treatment-related toxicity, graft versus host disease and organ toxicity. See, with allogenic HCT, what happens is there is a relapse risk reduction, but it is partially offset by the fatal treatment-related toxicity. So during HCT, whatever the treatment which we give, so this relapse risk reduction is offset by the increase in fatal treatment related toxicity. So despite this, there is no debate that patients with adverse risk AML have improved long-term survival with early allogenic HCT. But though there is a treatment related toxicity with HCT, but there is no debate that patients even with adverse risk AML, those who have undergone this transplantation, so there is a long-term survival with early allogenic HCT. Alternatively, high-dose chemotherapy with autologous HCT rescue is another post-remission approach in non-adverse risk subsets. So other approach is also like high-dose chemotherapy with autologous HCT rescue. So this is another post-remission approach in non-adverse risk subsets. Autologous HCT patients, they reserve their own stem cells collected during remission and cryopreserved following administration of myeloablative chemotherapy. See, if patients undergo this autologous HCT, they reserve their own stem cells. That is, they collect their stem cells during remission and they cryopreserve it following administration of a myeloablative chemotherapy. So the toxicity is relatively low with autologous HCT, that is 5% mortality rate. So though the mainly toxicity is seen with allogenic, but the toxicity with autologous HCT it is low, but the relapse rate is higher than with allogenic HCT due to the absence of the graft versus leukemia effect. Relapse rate, why it is higher? Because with allogenic HCT there will be a graft versus leukemia effect, but here in allogenic HCT there won't be any graft versus leukemia effect. So because of this, with autologous HCT relapse rate is higher. Favorable and intermediate risk patients may benefit from autologous HCT more so than adverse risk patients. So, adverse risk patients, so it's better to go with hematopoietic allogenic, but this favorable and intermediate risk patients, no, they may benefit from autologous HCT. Practically speaking, however, practically, if we speak practically, however, autologous HCT in AML patients is less frequently employed currently due to enhanced relapse risk reduction seen with allogenic HCT and the growing availability of HLA mismatched donors in novel transplantation approaches. Autologous HCT, no, so this is less frequently employed due to enhanced relapse risk reduction. And prognostic factors help to select the appropriate post-remission therapy in patients in CR1. So prognostic factors, no, they help to select the appropriate post-remission therapy. Our approach includes allogenic HCT in a complete remission, one for patients without favorable cytogenetics or genotypes. So after complete remission, so patients with adverse risk disease, no, they should proceed to allogenic HCT at complete remission if possible. So the decision for allogenic HCT for younger, see, mainly the problem comes with intermediate risk patients, whether after complete remission, whether they have to go for in younger intermediate risk patients. It's complex and individualized as described above. We recommend it when an HLA matched donor is available. So younger patient is there, he has got an intermediate risk cytogenetics. So if HLA matched donor is available, it is better that patient has to go for HCT. And subset of patients may benefit from targeted therapy given during remission. So, and few patients, no, they may benefit from targeted therapy given during remission. Emerging data demonstrate survival benefit from the incorporation of the FLT3 inhibitor midostaurin, for example, into induction and post remission therapies for patients with FLT3 mutated AML. So, if any patient has got this FLT3 mutated AML, so it's better to incorporate this midostaurin induction and also for the post remission therapy. And allogenic transplantation in complete remission one, so it is still recommended for these patients if HLA matched donor is available. For patients in morphological complete remission, morphologically complete remission, measurement of minimal residual disease remains a very important and challenging research. Morphologically, patient is in complete remission, but there can be minimal residual disease. So this remains a very important and challenging research area. Cytogenetics are a mainstay of disease assessment, and persistence of abnormal karyotype in spite of morphological complete remission. So this is clearly associated with poor clinical outcomes. Patient is in morphological complete remission, but the cytogenetics, no, so they are a mainstay of disease assessment. So even though there is a morphological complete remission, but if still cytogenetics or persistence abnormal karyotype, so they are associated with poor clinical outcomes. Immunophenotyping to detect minute populations of blast or sensitive molecular assays. Example, a reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction to detect AML associated molecular abnormalities. NP1, RUNX1, RUNX1T1 and CBFP, MYHL transcripts, PML RARA can be performed to assess whether minimal residual disease is present at sequential time points during after treatment. So we have to know the minimal residual disease after treatment, though patient is in complete morphologically complete response. So what has to be done? Immunophenotyping to detect. So this immunophenotyping, no, even minute populations of blast, or we can use this sensitive molecular assays like reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction to detect the AML associated molecular abnormalities. So what are the AML associated molecular abnormalities? Like NPM1, RUNX1, T1, CBFP, MYHL transcripts, PML RARA can be performed to assess whether minimal residual disease is present at sequential time points during or after treatment, and whether emerging next generation sequencing or serial quantitative assessment using flow or RT-PCR performed during remission. Okay, so we have this next generation sequencing or a serial quantitative assessment using flow or RT-PCR performed during remission. So they can effectively direct successful subsequent therapy and improve clinical outcome remains to be determined. And currently no consensus exists for the optimal minimal residual disease measurement technique or its application, although it is increasingly employed in clinical practice. So currently no consensus exists for the optimal so what is the consensus for optimal minimal residual disease measurement? It's increasingly employed in clinical practice. No consensus exists, and data suggests that minimal residual disease measurement can sometimes some settings be a reliable discriminator between patients will continue in complete remission or relapse, but whether subsequent therapy, allogenic HCT or additional therapy can effectively eradicate disease in such patients is not yet clear. However, in the subset of patients with acute promyelocytic leukemia, but we have the subset, no, acute promyelocytic leukemia, serial RT-PCR for the PML RARA transcript. So in these patients, what transcript will be there? PML RARA transcript will be there, no? So however, in the subset of patients with APL with serial RT-PCR for the PML RARA transcript, so this is a very useful and reliable tool. So in APL patients, RT-PCR for PML RARA, so this is a very useful and reliable tool to detect early relapse. So this is a very useful tool to detect early relapse and to direct initiation of reinduction therapy prior to onset of overt relapse. So before the relapse occurs, so reinduction therapy can be given. So critical in the general understanding of minimal residual disease in all disease subsets is a recognition that even patients with undetectable levels of minimal residual disease remain at risk for leukemic relapse. So though we are trying to detect the minimal residual disease, but there are subsets that patient they don't have they don't have this MRD detectable levels, but still they are at risk for leukemic relapse. And here we have the novel therapies and clinical development in acute myeloid leukemia. FLT3 inhibitors, okay, midostaurin, quizartinib, we know this. And so these are the different epigenetic modulators, that is IDH1 and IDH2 inhibitors, histone deacetylase inhibitors. And then we also have this mitochondrial inhibitors, BCL2, BCLX and MCL1 inhibitors. So this is venetoclax. Therapies targeting oncogenic proteins, EV1 targeting, NP1 targeting, antibodies and immunoconjugates like gemtuzumab, ozugamycin, and then we have monoclonal antibodies against CD33, 33, 44, and then we have CAR T cells or genetically engineered T cell receptor T cells, and then we also have the immune checkpoint inhibitors and therapies against AML environment. What are the therapies against AML environment?